Hello, Packers fans. Welcome into PackersNews.com. I'm Kassidy Hill, joined by Ryan Wood here on a windy day in Green Bay. Ryan,
Yeah, I'd say
we're out
blood
at practice.
that.
Yeah, we're out at practice today, and thought we were going to get blown over a few times, but it was a really good lesson for some of these young guys as to what the weather can do in Green Bay at times, especially when it comes to fielding punts. And I know Mason Crosby impressed you for sure out there today in that wind.
Well, he had a 20 plus mile an hour wind to his back, and he drained a 56 yarder like halfway up the upright. I mean, I talked to him after. He said he'd be good from like 68, 70 yards in that. It kind of felt like I was on the Weather Channel covering a cyclone or a
Right.
hurricane. Like literally, you lean into the wind, and I've always kind of wondered how that would be like. I feel like we got a taste of that today. Fortunately, I have no hair, so that I had that going for me, because otherwise, I don't know how to see practice.
Yeah, it would have been really interesting for some of these guys too if that was their first. I guess if that was their first game, if it was like that, because as we know, the wind will bounce in Lambeau. All of that to say, though, as you said, Mason Crosby with the wind on him was able to get it from pretty far out. We saw some punt drills as well today. This is still OTAs. This is still early on in the season. We take everything with a grain of salt that we see during this time. But does it feel like to you, and we're going to take some questions here too, so if you have any questions, drop them in the comments. But does it feel like to you, like it does to me, that already it feels like special teams is getting more important? It seems to be getting more attention during practice, at least from these guys, and definitely getting more respect.
I'm going to be very interested to see how many starters are repping special teams once camp starts. Rasul Douglas and Eric Stokes were on the punt team and the punt cover team today. They're both getting reps at gunner on the punt team and then blocking the gunner. That's interesting. And the thing is, Eric Stokes, 4.25 speed as a gunner, that's a good fit. That makes a lot of sense. So I think it's going to be very interesting to see, not just giving lip service to it, but actually implementing starters on special teams. I know it's a radical idea, but if your special teams are terrible, maybe put your better players in that phase, right? I mean, it's common sense. Now, why don't they do that? Injury risk. Rasul Douglas and Eric Stokes are not paid to go tackle the punt returner. They're paid to get the football from the opposing quarterback and the lockdown receiver. So it's a happy balance. But if it's as bad as it was last year, put better players on special teams. You can't not get to the Super Bowl because you can't field a competent special teams, and that's the remedy for that. So it's going to be really interesting to see how they strike that balance once they get into training camp.
And I feel like we're talking so much about special teams because there's very little we can glean from this team, offense and defense wise, to this point. No Aaron Rodgers again today, which was not a huge shock. We didn't expect him to be here. What maybe have been a little bit more surprising was no Jair Alexander for a second week in a row and no Sammy Watkins for a second week in a row. These are two guys that, respectively on offense and defense, are supposed to really sort of carry your identity and who you want to be. Ryan, I know these are voluntary workouts. It is very important to stress that. There was an NFLPA guy there today, just kind of watching things as well. These are voluntary. But when Matt LaFleur was asked about it today, and I know we asked about different players, you asked him specifically about Sammy Watkins, he seemed a little frustrated that he was missing some of his guys a week before mandatory minicamp.
Yeah, and I don't know if I'm going to put too much stock into that, because I asked Matt LaFleur if he was essentially comfortable with Sammy Watkins not being here, considering the quarterback's not here, right? And if you're a receiver, it's the position that's tied more to quarterback than any other. Sammy Watkins is a veteran. Yes, he's new, and yes, he's a guy that needs to crack the 53, but he's a receiver. No quarterback if he's really missing all that much. And so I don't know if Matt LaFleur was just trying to send a message of, in general, voluntary workouts still matter, that they're, like kind of like punters are people too. Voluntary workouts are still workouts, it's something that you do and you got to take it seriously instead of saying, yeah, it's fine. Who cares? It's voluntary workout. So I don't know if that was necessarily a message to Sammy Watkins. But, he's without the quarterback here. I don't know how much he's missing. As far as Jair Alexander, Not at all surprised he's not here. If he just signed a 4-year, $84 million contract extension. Enjoy life this spring. Be healthy. Show up for the mandatory stuff and see you in camp, basically. I think Preston Smith's in that boat. Rashawn Gary didn't have the extension, but he's coming off a phenomenal season. Those guys, Jonathan Garvin's a guy that I was surprised wasn't here. He's a guy that could have a significant role as a third outside linebacker on this defense, and he's not at OTAs. Again, voluntary, but if any, that.
Hello? We may have lost Ryan for a second. While we do, as he was talking about the defensive line specifically, it is going to look a little bit different, especially with Devontae Wyatt being drafted this year. I believe that we have Ryan coming back. So we're going to bring Ryan back in here as well. As we kind of watch some of these defensive linemen, Reed, TJ Slayton, I know guys were asking about TJ Slayton as well. What is this defense going to look like? Ryan, I know you and I were talking today about where the Packers were lining up Kenny Clark. And again, no Rashawn Gary. This is going to look a little different when everyone gets back. But what is this defense in your mind going to look like now that you've kind of seen them move these guys around and at least line up TJ Slayton, Kenny Clark? Where do you kind of imagine this landing once we get to training camp?
Well, first of all, it only took me 5 minutes to break my camera, so I feel like I'm winning. This is the real winner of this defensive-minded offseason. A real winner, and that's Kenny Clark. I talked with him today in the locker room, and he's a guy that is mid-20s and coming. His last 2 healthy seasons, he was a Pro Bowler, and really at the top of his game. Should be at the top of his game. He said he feels that way. He had a really good year last year, and with that said, he kind of back leaned against the locker, was counting how many sacks, how many times he had quarterbacks in his arms and didn't finish those plays. I mean, he, by his estimation, he should have had 9-10 sacks last year, and then he's an all-pro guy, and those are just finishing plays. You just got to finish plays. But as far as getting more opportunities, Kenny Clark said that this is by far, this is the most talented defensive line that he's been on since joining the Packers as a first-round pick. They've got the most depth. Matt LaFleur said the same thing. And all of that makes life easier for Kenny Clark because now you've got a Jaron Reed who is a veteran guy and can, it's not just Dean Lowry there. You've got a Devontae Wyatt who might need some time to get going as a rookie, but his athletic tangibles are off the charts. There's a lot of, even guys like TJ Slayton, who with Dean Lowry not doing team reps, TJ Slayton has been the nose, and Kenny Clark's been out the 3, even though he played more nose last year. For your 5th defensive lineman, that's a pretty good 5th defensive lineman. So, yeah, there's a lot of depth and talent on this defensive line, and it's going to be one of those things that Kenny Clark's a big benefactor of that.
Todd says, interested to watch former quarterback, now tight end Tyler Davis. Golly, cannot talk. How he fares with a year under his belt. Ryan, Tyler Davis has kind of become the talk of the offseason. He's getting a lot of hype for a guy that, let's be honest, was 4th on the depth chart last year. Tyler Davis, just for those that want to be on the lookout, is going to be a focus of one of our big offseason stories as well. Got to spend some time with him this spring. So really, really excited about that because he's always been a guy that we felt like was right there, that just needed proper coaching because he's never received proper coaching as a tight end. I don't know how much you got to watch the offense over the past couple of days, Ryan, but do you feel like this tight end unit, especially not having Bobby Tunyon until probably week 7, week 8-ish, is this a good spot for him to come up? And is there much competition there, I guess is what I'm saying? Is
no.
Nagara really going to be the guy? Or does Tyler Davis have an opportunity?
They don't have the guy there. For all the talk about how dire receiver is, and it is. I mean, you look at the receiving depth chart, it's not going to give you warm fuzzies. That tight end group is even more dire. There's not the guy. It's wide open. So, chicken or the egg, right? Is Tyler Davis being talked about so much because he's impressed, or Is it because no one else has, right? So that we'll find out in camp. But Tyler Davis, Josiah DeGuara, Dominic Daphne, both of them have Davis and Daphne have got a lot of first team reps. That's the tight end group. Marcedes Lewis, obviously, but until Robert Tonyan comes back, and then if you're the Packers, you hope that he comes back as Robert Tonyan after that ACL. And if he does, they've got the guy. But until he comes back, there's no the guy there.
Speaking of Robert Tonyan, got to watch him work again this week, or again today, like we did last week, working alongside Kylan Hill, Nelton Jenkins. And Kylan had a good little exchange with you. I'll let you share it, just about he and Bobby tearing their ACLs at the same time and what it's been like for the past few months.
Yeah. Basically, the Cardinals are on their bad list. Kind of said it's okay because we got the dub. But yeah, it's just two fluky injuries and two totally different things, right? Because Robert Tonyan was a non-contact, whereas Kylan Hill got just completely torpedoed in the knee by Jonathan Ward of the Cardinals kickoff coverage team. But yeah, it's Kylan Hill wants to be back by training camp. We'll see. That's going to be right at 9 months. It's going to be right on the fringe of that window where guys come back from ACLs. It's going to be an arduous process to get him back there. He said he's not running in cleats yet, not until next month. So it's still very midway through this whole ordeal. But the big thing for him, can he get back and have that explosiveness, that burst, the agility on that knee that had really wowed the Packers? I mean, they've got Aaron Jones and A.J. Dillon, so they're not looking for running backs. And even still, Kylan Hill was kind of forcing his way onto the field for a handful of snaps. And the second half of the season, if that could have continued and grew into something more. So the question of that knee, he's entering his age 24 season. He's a young guy. That's very helpful, obviously. But can he get that knee back? If he does, that's another weapon.
And that's a very good point about he could be back as early as training camp. But I know with Bobby, I'd said week 7, week 8, that's sort of worst case scenario. Actually, worst case scenario would be David Bakhtiari a year and a half later, still not out on the field. Matt LaFleur was asked about that today and was asked, it was even pushed, should there be concern? And he simply said was our plan all along, was to hold Bakhtiari out during this time. So before I take one or two last questions here, Ryan, let me ask you this. Do you believe Matt LaFleur that this was their plan all along and there's not any concern? He didn't technically answer the question on whether or not there was concern, but
for the life, I can't imagine why they would have David Bakhtiari participating in voluntary OTA drills after having 27 snaps last season. There's absolutely zero reason for him to do that. What I don't know is how the knee is, because we haven't really seen it, right? We saw the 27 snaps, and the Packers thought that he was back and then shut it down 2 weeks later in the playoffs. I have no idea at age 31 what that knee is going to be like for David Bakhtiari. The guy is a crazy worker. I mean, a workaholic. He puts in a lot of time and effort, energy. So it's not going to be a lack of want to, but he's 31. Mm-hmm. He hasn't played in a year. I mean, he missed an entire year of his career with that knee. At this stage, it's tough to get back. And the other thing with David Bakhtiari, too, is the key to his entire game. It's he's got great feet. He's got good strength. He's athletic. The key to his entire game is an uncommon flexibility for a big guy like that. You watch him set up before the snap. It's not how you teach it. And he can do things with that flexibility, get away with things from a pass pro standpoint that you don't see 300-pound dudes get away with. His flexibility is huge in that knee. And so that's the big question mark for him coming back.
Yeah, and we'll see maybe a little bit more as we get into training camp, which is when Matt LaFleur said they really wanted to have him ready by. Going to take a couple of final questions here. One from Randy. Was Love getting any reps in? Yes, he was. He was running what at this point is going to be called the first team offense. It will look a lot different once Aaron Rodgers and Sammy Watkins and some of these other guys return and as the receivers come on. But Ryan, have you seen anything from Love to change your opinion of what it was at the end of last season thus far? Granted, no pads have been on.
No, they ain't playing football yet, so it's tough to say. I'll say this was not a day with that win that you wanted to throw the ball downfield in. And there was a lot of checkdowns today, but he threw a lot to A.J. Dillon in the flat, but I don't blame him because throwing it more than 10 yards downfield today was an adventure.
We say that, And then the best play of the day came from Kurt Benkert and
Yeah,
Romeo Dubs. And it was what, 20 plus yards, 24, 25?
yeah, like 24 yards.
Yeah, 24, 25 yarder from Kurt Benkert, who always puts zip on the ball, sometimes to a detriment. But against that win today, it played in his favor. Great back shoulder throw to
He
Romeo.
looked like 87. He looked like 87 with that back shoulder.
Yeah.
Another 87 that the Packers fans might remember fondly.
Yeah, he talked about that actually as well. He said 87 was assigned to him. He did not know that was his number until he saw it on social media, and it wasn't exciting at first, and then he had to remind himself of players that have worn it in the past, and that it's an honor to be number 87 for the Packers.
That's
So,
daunting. Here, kid,
thought
40's
that
number.
was a little interesting. We're going to take a final question here from Jordan. Speaking of receivers, there's so much competition at wide receiver, but it seems like a lot of the same type of players at the position. How do you think we decipher who to keep?
Well, the Packers certainly have a mold. They like having those tall, good-sized guys that can run, right? And that's what they've been drafting. And you go even back to MVS and EQ and those guys. That's Brian Gutekunst. That's his profile. So, Randall Cobb and Amari Rodgers are differently built. They're smaller. They're more your slot guys. Amari Rodgers, we said it before, but he's a huge wild card this offseason. If he can somehow get over whatever that rookie year was for him, if he can get over that and be a third-round guy, the guy that everyone thought he'd be coming out of Clemson, that'd go a long way because they don't have a lot of slot guys. Devontae Adams, that was one of the things that always, kind of got under the radars. Yeah, he was the number one receiver, but he could play anywhere. Devontae Adams was every bit as good in the slot as he was on the perimeter. He could move him all over the field. Not a lot of those kind of guys anymore.
Right. Well, it will be interesting to see as they evolve. We are done viewing practice for this week. The Packers will practice again on Wednesday and Thursday. It will not be open to media, but then we will be there next week for mandatory minicamp, which should be pretty exciting. Ryan, you want to place your bets now? Will those be the 3 days we see Aaron Rodgers?
Yeah, it's mandatory. He'll be here
for sure. Mandatory.
Not that I'm a betting man, but
yes, you are. Anyways, thank you all for joining in. I'm going to go do something with the rat's nest that the wind made my hair. That's going to be
I didn't
fun.
have that problem. I'm lucky.
I believe Randy up here asked what was the wind at miles per hour. I checked it at one point. Weather app said that it was blowing at 20 miles per hour, but it didn't tell me what the gusts were. I would, no lie, no exaggeration, I would say those gusts were getting up to 50 miles per hour easy.
It was Weather Channel TV guy in a monsoon wind. That's what. That I was. It was good. It wasn't raining because I don't even. We'd have to build an ark.
Right. If it had been raining, Jim Cantori would have been out there with us for sure.
Right. I kind of felt that. Yeah. I was like, all right, I'm doubling right now. I'm taking notes on personnel grouping and whatnot and kind of reporting the weather here.
At one point I stood like this and I was like, I wonder if it could hold me up. And it just about did.
You did that when you were standing next to me and I didn't know what you were doing. And I just happened to notice you kind of leaning back. It looked like you were falling. And I was like, it startled me. I was like, I was there for you, Kassidy.
Thank you. Thank you, Ryan. I appreciate it. Always here for each other. Guys, we will still have more coverage coming for you this week from practice, just what we've seen over the past 2 weeks through voluntary workouts, observations, being able to talk to the guys. So keep a lookout on PackersNews.com for continuing coverage over this week, and then we will get you ready next week for mandatory minicamp. Ryan, thanks so much. Thanks, guys.